When you're managing a property like this, I think you're always very conscious, or at least I'm very conscious of the fact that Pichon Baron is what it is thanks to the work of many generations of people who've gone before us. That might sound a bit serious, but in fact, it's quite frankly a daily joy to be working here and looking after this great place and getting to taste these wonderful wines. I think we're very conscious of the fact that we are part of an historical process. And what we have to try and do while we're here is to devote ourselves to looking after the property, looking after the vineyard, making the wines as great as they can in order to leave the vineyard in as good a state as it possibly can be and leave the reputation of the wines in as good a state as they possibly can be for the people who will carry on after us, looking after this wonderful place and making these wonderful wines. Well, I've tasted quite a few old ones. In 1943 was memorable, and one has to remember the conditions in which it was made. It was made in the middle of the war with unimaginably difficult conditions. A lot of the people who would normally have made the wine were not here. There weren't too many men around. They were in prison camps or whatever. And for me, it's a very moving wine because there was enormous uncertainty, to say the least, about how the world was going to be. And yet the people here carried on looking after their vineyards and making their wine. And there are still 1 or 2 bottles of it left today. And for me, it's one of the most beautiful and memorable bottles of Pichon I've tasted. So this is the part of our cellar where we keep the very old bottles. Just occasionally, it's the correct moment to open one of them. So let's go in and have a look. So we were talking about the 1943 before. And here is a bottle of Pichon Baron, 1943.
Lovely.
I think we should take it up to the tasting room and see what it's like.
Fantastic. Pichon Baron is a powerful, very fruit-forward Pauillac. And when you're looking at the chateau, actually the vineyards behind you, Chateau Latour, then you have Comtesse de Lalande, then you have, on the other side of the slightly small Denton landscape, Léoville-Lascaz. You have Léoville-Poëferet. I mean, super, super special place on planet Earth when it comes to wine. This is the home of absolute legends.
So Pichon has a very illustrious long history. It dates back from 1694 when the then Baron Jacques de Pichon made the very smart move of marrying an heiress called Thérèse de Rozan. And this still remains by far the best way to get your hands on a great vineyard. And like any good French baron, when he married Thérèse de Rozan, who owned this property, and immediately changed the name and named it after himself. But I mean, that's I suppose how barons behave. And so ever since the chateau has been named after the barons of Pichon Longueville. It's a very extraordinary thing how important the notion of terroir is here in the great vineyards of the Medoc. The Grand Vin of Pichon Baron, but also 2 second wines, the Griffon and the Tourelle, and the second wines of Pichon Baron take their personality from the parcels that they come from. So it's very much a terroir selection within our own property. And then if you compare our wine with that of the neighbours, whether it's in Pauillac or in Saint-Julien, you have the most remarkable differences in personality from between very close neighbours. By the way, I'm a very big fan of the great Saint-Juliens as well. And for me, Pichon Baron is above all characterized by its greatest terroir, which is the big plateau that's right next to the chateau, where you have deep beds of gravel with some calcaire a bit lower down. But above all, it's the deep beds of gravel, which are the perfect terroir for the Cabernet Sauvignon grape. What you get as a result are wines of extraordinary concentration and purity and length and power. You have elegance, harmony, and freshness, almost a delicate quality. And this alliance of intensity and finesse and delicacy is what characterizes the wines of Pichon Baron in particular, and many others in Pauillac. Invested quite a lot in doing it, and there was nothing. I don't think so. I thought that the 1962, which is a very lovely vintage at Pichon Baron, would be a rather good bridge between the younger wines that we're tasting and the 1943 that we will taste during lunch.
Fantastic. Wow. It's a wine I already during Primeur gave the possibility of a perfect score, and every bottle I've had since has been given a perfect score. And for me, it's the greatest Pichon I've ever tried, with the 16 as a very, very close second, and the 19 is very, very close third for me. When you're judging a wine or trying to judge a wine, because sometimes we do some pretty horrible mistakes as well, but we are only looking at some pixels and we're trying to see the full Rembrandt. All of us do a few mistakes every now and then, but I'm quite impressed that we don't do more. It's a quite big painting to learn.
What all great wines have in common is that these are wines that live in time, and they reveal different things at different times. And for me, it's a very major part of the fascination of these wines is how time is actually a very important element in what the wine is going to give you. And I remember tasting the 22 with you on Primeur, and we're tasting it today. And I mean, we're living in time as well, but the wine is evolving. And for me, that's part of the fascination of Grand Cru wine. You have a few bottles of wine like this in your cellar. You open one from time to time, and it will be showing you other aspects of itself as time goes by. And obviously what that really means is that one case isn't enough. You should have two, you know.
The way Christian Seeley and his team is running the property, Corinne and the other people working there, you just feel that they're part of the family. You're meeting the family members. You just feel warm and happy and welcomed.
I don't think one should ever feel guilty if you've bought a case of wine and you open a bottle and you think, wow, that's delicious, and it's 5 years old. If you think it's delicious when it's 5 years old, then you're right, and it's not a crime. And you can always keep a few bottles to see how they're going to develop. But there are definitely wines that actually need that time. So it varies. If you have a year that is fresher, lighter, more delicate, I think you should try and let the wine be like that. Let's go with the style of the vintage and make a wine obviously faithful to the spirit of the terroir of the place, but faithful to the spirit of the vintage.
It's interesting to see because you can really follow what's going on with the next tasting note, which I think is really incredible that's being part of my life now. But and to be able to follow these wines for fairly close, even if I'm not working at any winery.
We follow these wines very closely, literally month by month. We know what's happening to them. And so we have an extremely intense personal relationship with these wines. And however, the great advantage you have is that not only do you do that less frequently, obviously, but pretty regularly, you do it with all the wines, and so you have a much broader vision of what's happening elsewhere. It's two different kind of experience, both, I think, extremely important. Regarding pulling the corks on very old bottles, obviously it happens that I do this quite often in various properties, quite a lot in Portugal, sometimes here. And sometimes an old cork, you've got a lovely corkscrew, you start the mechanical action and you can feel the cork beginning to disintegrate. And at that point, I normally stop, unscrew the corkscrew, then get the bottle firmly grasped between the knees, put the corkscrew in again, and then wait. And this is totally irrational and superstitious, but my feeling is that you have to wait until the cork is not expecting you to act. And so you just wait, and then you take it by surprise and pull the cork. And sometimes a really old cork will come out when it's not expecting that and you're not expecting that, and it can work. Not always.
Here's a smile. Color is beautiful. That's just such finesse and elegance. It's and this is where I would love all my readers to be able to experience exactly this with the exact same bottle at the same time, so they would sort of know what lovely mature wine should be. It's really harmonious and really elegant. The everything which is here is just in really good balance with everything else. It's a little bit like walking into a nice tobacconist, where you have these cigar notes, the cedar wood. And on the palate, I think it's just really harmonious, very refreshing. That acidity is just vibrant. It's really playful. Yeah, wonderful.
I agree with all of that. One of the miraculous things about this particular wine today is that there's still this freshness, and it's of course it's old, but it's also quite youthful. And there's some fruit as well. It's
dried fruit that dates, and I think it's really marvelous.
And just by pure coincidence, my brother was born in 1962, and he was 63 years old yesterday. So I think I have to take a picture with this bottle and saying, "My dear brother, I am drinking this for you." Of course, he'd rather I sent him a bottle, but
of course he.
Okay, you got. I need a. I don't know.
It just brings out how special it is with these old bottles.
Voila, Jonathan. I just wanted you to know that I'm thinking of you here at Pichon Baron, and I am tasting a wine for you. Here is the 1962 Pichon Baron. It's absolutely marvelous. I don't want you to feel jealous. I just want you to feel that I'm thinking of you. And it's a really wonderful moment. Happy birthday. I've been here in charge of things looking after Pichon Baron since the beginning of 2001. And so I arrived in the AXA Millésime group in 1993 when AXA had bought Quinta de Naval. I spent 8 marvelous years living in Naval, in the Douro, working very hard on polishing up the jewel. And then in late 1999, Mr. Bébéard, who is the visionary entrepreneurial genius who created AXA and who also created AXA Millésime, I got a call to come to Paris, and they made me the proposition. Just basically saying, we like what's been going on in Portugal. Would you like to come here and take over the managing of all the properties of AXA Millésime at the end of 2000, when Jean-Michel Caz, who was my predecessor, was due to retire, and so that's what happened.
And you've been enjoying it ever since, I guess.
Ever since.
Sitting here discussing these wines with you, I remember the TV show with Oz Clarke and James May.
Oh yes, it was a very funny show because the underlying idea behind the show was that Oz was the sophisticated wine critic who knew lots about wine, and that James May was the car guy who drank a lot of beer and was just discovering wine, and so there was supposed to be this sort of friction between the two, where James was supposed to be professing his ignorance, and Oz was supposed to be shocked by all that. In fact, it wasn't. They were actually acting a bit because, of course, Oz is the great expert and loves great wine. But James actually is quite into it, and he got progressively more into it as the evening went on. I opened a bottle of Pichon 88, which is a vintage I like very much, and he was tasting it, and he was saying, This wine, you've changed my life. This wine is just, it's so beautiful. I didn't know that wine could be like that. And the director said, cut, you're not supposed to say things like that. So he had to be, he had to stay in character. And so some of the nice things he said didn't actually get on the film. But he said some nice things anyway. But sometimes he said stuff, and then Oz was heard saying, "Oh my God, what has he said?" You know, it was very funny. But it was a very, very fun evening, actually.
Being together with Christian at Pichon Baron, and he actually pulls out a 1943, and that's the one we're having. That's something I will probably never forget.
In 25 years, I've had 2 bottles of this, so...
Wow. Wow.
I think it was about 15 years ago, actually. So, they can be really evanescent. You pull the cork, you pour the first glass, and you smell something absolutely wonderful, and then within minutes, it disappears. And it was very beautiful to have had those few moments, but it's rather sad after that. And then sometimes the exact opposite happens, where they're very good to start with, and they just go on developing for a long time. But you can never be sure with these very old bottles. So hedging our bets means we taste it now, and then we taste it at lunch to see whether it's actually disappeared or developed. 1943 Pichon Baron, which we talked about before, vinified obviously in very difficult conditions. It was the middle of the war, and nobody really knew how the world was going to be, but people just carried on insofar as it was possible to do so, doing their work, looking after the vines, picking the grapes, making the wines, bottling the wines, and they were right to carry on doing so, because here we are today, and here's the wine. In fact, I may
That was brave.
Yep. We record when it's necessary. So now let's see. It'll be very interesting to see what happens to this over the next 45 minutes to an hour, whether it folds in and disappears or whether it opens up. It's at the moment, to me, it appears slightly ghost-like as a wine. There's still freshness here, and there's still a little tiny bit of fruit left, and it's definitely not dried out and dead, but it's getting rather faint as an echo of the wine.
I haven't tried the 43 Pichon Baron before, so I don't have any others to compare it with, but it's a bit shy on the nose, but I don't think there's nothing faulty with anything which is there, it's just a bit shy. But I'm again, very nice acidity. Acidity is not the thing that dies away, but I think that there's a nice sweetness in the fruit curve. It's that very gentle, again, into that fig dates world, a little bit of raisins, and I think that's very, very smooth and very harmonious, and there's nothing that is drying out. So I'm thinking this will actually, hopefully, being able to be with us for the next, hopefully, hour or so.
I have a feeling it may develop. Let's see. Yeah. But I agree. There's still fruit and still some sweetness of fruit there, and it's still fresh and bright. So let's see how it develops.
What's your favorite food with Pichon Baron?
It's a dangerous question to answer because it's rather important not to be too specific. If I say, well, what I really like is with a cold ptarmigan that has from Scotland, then people say, well, I'm not going to have that very often, am I? I mean, I drink Pichon quite regularly, and I think it goes rather well with everything, really. But I love game birds, basically, and so I think that with partridge or pheasant, I think it's absolutely marvelous, and frankly, with very good beef. That's what it's good for. But, you don't have to stick to these rather old-fashioned, I'm an old-fashioned eater, probably. You can have a great, if you're a vegetarian, there's no reason not to drink Pichon Baron. It can go well with anything,
So about 3 hours open, but not decanted on the 62.
I found the 62 is on a sort of plateau since the moment we've opened it. It has maybe opened up a little bit, but it certainly hasn't gone down in aromatic quality or anything like that. And it just seems to me very lovely as it was when we first opened it.
Then the 43, which started out a bit more gentle and now about 2.5 hours. Again, not decanted.
Yep. In fact, I think the 43 has been very much on an upward trajectory since we opened.
I completely agree. What you described like a little bit of a ghost, especially on the nose, that's gone. It's definitely not a ghost anymore. It's more powerful. And I think the nose now is more or less exactly as the body, but the body has also gained weight. But you have that, it sort of smells like it tastes with the same dried fruits, the tobacco notes. I think it's really charming. I actually think it's added a few seconds of aftertaste as well. And I have to say, thinking about those people making this wine was, I guess, none of them amongst us anymore, unless they're incredibly old, making this during hugely difficult times. It's thank you to them for doing it, and thank you to you for storing it and also opening it and sharing it with us.
Well, I find this wine very moving because of the terrible times in which it was made, the persistence and the resilience of the people who made it. It's also a social phenomenon because most of the men who used to work here were not here in 1943, and so it was a wine made by the women who were here. And in those days, women were not very much involved in making wine, but at that time they were, because the men were not there. And 1943 is a wine born of difficult circumstances and the beginning, the very distant beginning of a very big social change. Here at Pichon today, our head enologist is a woman, and everything has changed. But in those days, it was extremely unusual, and so the 43 was a little harbinger of changes to come in the distant future. You still have this bright, fresh balance, which essentially comes from the terroir. However difficult the conditions were, an old vintage of Pichon is a great wine.
It is.